good to see everyone here. I'm actually on recreation leave at the moment, and I managed to clock up 58 days rec leave, and I decided I better take these bloody things before semester 2 starts. So that's why I'm in the office today. But I'm really happy to be here anyway, because one thing I'm really passionate about when it comes to teaching is kind of pushing the boundaries and the limits of what we can actually do in terms of when it comes to things like engagement with students. So I had an experience which is probably similar to most people leading into COVID in 2020 and around about March 2020. I had never even heard of Zoom, and that's probably true of almost everyone here. One of the good things for me and that was beneficial for me was that I wasn't actually in the classroom at the time. So most of my teaching is concentrated in the second part of the year, so semester 2, and I coordinate 2 classes in the Faculty of Science. So I've got a class where Mushtaba, who's online at the moment, has helped teach into previously, so hello. And that class is our first year class Earth Science, Planet Earth, the Big Picture course. So it's Introduction to Earth Science. So we look at natural resources and volcanoes and hazards and stuff like that. And a second year class called Paleobiology, where we basically look at the history of life through time. But being in March, I still had a few months to have a think about how to get stuff kind of sorted out. And I spent, I was working 80-hour weeks in March 2020, helping other people get their stuff together and developing resources for teaching and stuff like that. And then I also had time to really try to understand what Zoom is all about. And so I really feel for my colleagues who suddenly had to switch to Zoom or to switch to that online side of things, because I know how friggin' hard it is. Because, what I'm going to show people today is something that I've been thinking about for a very, very long time. And I had that little advantage over other people leading into that particular semester anyway. So what I want to do today is really kind of simulate what I do in a regular classroom. And one thing I always do, and one thing I mentioned before, we've had a few people coming in at the moment. Yeah, didn't bury my head in the sand. Yeah. It's just I love the interaction. Like I want this to be like one of my regular type of lectures. So in my lectures, I always encourage people to turn their cameras on. I always have a default, camera muted, camera off, microphone muted kind of policy, and I allow the students to decide whether they want to engage with that or not. And it's always really good. I never get like a full class, but even if I get like 10 or 20%, that's still something that's really quite cool. So I want to simulate it like that. I'm really happy just to turn this into an open discussion about ideas for interaction and engagement with students as well. So, you don't have to put your hand up, just unmute yourself or type into the chat, anything like that. So I'll keep an eye on that, and Amber's watching that at the same time as well. So what I'm going to do is something a little bit weird and might be a little bit different to what you've seen before, but I'm not going to be sharing my screen at all today. So if you're looking at me on a tiny little matchbox size screen at the moment, you might want to just make that up into a bigger kind of frame at the moment as we go through, because I'll show you why in a second. And this is kind of the reason why, because one of the things I've figured out when I had that little lead into my semester 2 in 2020 is how to kind of work on Zoom to make it a much more effective way of engaging with people. And I can use things like my PowerPoint slides, and this is an example of one of the PowerPoint slides at the moment as my background. Now, if you can figure out how to put a PowerPoint slide as your background, you can literally put anything that you can put onto your computer as a background. I'll show you how to do that a little bit later. So I've called this session Turbocharge Zoom, and it's not really just about Zoom. It's about, these ideas could be integrated into things like Microsoft Teams as well. So if you're a Teams user, which I'm not, you can still adopt all of these kind of things. And even if you don't want to teach on Zoom and you want to teach in the physical classroom itself, a lot of these strategies are things that you could bring into the classroom as well. So I've been doing this for a long time. And, one of the things I really have I've kind of learned over the years is that students always want to engage. They don't want to come to a lecture and just sit there and write down notes. They want to have their say. So a lot of things that I do in my classroom are basically things that I've figured out in the physical world up until 2019. And then I've figured out ways to adopt those strategies and bring them into the digital world itself. So Zoom just happened to be that particular carrier right there. So that's where we are at the moment. So turbocharging Zoom. If anyone's on Twitter and want to follow me there, I don't tweet that much about teaching, although I do have a teaching website I might talk a little bit about later, but I mostly use that for research. So I'm actually a paleontologist, which is a bit of a probably weird profession for someone to have, especially in a room like this, I guess. But it's something that's pretty cool to me. Of course, we need to do an acknowledgement to country. I was reading some interesting surveys about staff satisfaction and feedback about how things are going across the university recently. And I saw these interesting comments where a lot of people tend to feel that things like the acknowledgements of countries that we often see at the starts of meetings or, presentations or whatever, become a little bit performative. And I don't want it to be like that. Of course, we acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands in which you currently meet. So I'm currently sitting in the Riches building, which is part of Brisbane. So the traditional owners that we have here are the Turrbal and the Yagara people. And, one of the beautiful things that I get to do is work on the story, not so much of humans in Australia itself, but the environments in which they interacted. So I'm quite over the archaeology side of things. And it always blows my mind to think that we've got the oldest archaeological evidence for people in Australia dating back to 65,000 years, if you didn't know. And that's on the basis of some really wonderful archaeological records way up in the top end, up near Darwin itself. Now, down in southeast Queensland here, the oldest archaeological records that we have down here date currently published at around about 18 to 20,000 years. But I've got some very dear colleagues at UQ and elsewhere who are currently working on a study where they've been able to push that back to around about 45,000 years ago, which is really remarkable. So there's some really wonderful shell midden type of deposits, which is basically like a refuse heap for prehistoric peoples that have been dated, excavated on Stradbroke Island itself. So that's part of the Quandamooka country over there. So hopefully that study will come out soon. But what I'm really always blown away with is it's not just these people, who were on the lands, but it's a culture that has been around for all of those years. So many millennia, which I think is really fantastic. So the other thing I wanted to do as well is just share something really cool that I saw recently, and that was a really lovely documentary on SBS, or a series on SBS called The First Inventors. And I've only watched the first episode of this, but it's basically just talking about Indigenous people and the way that they adapted to the environments that they had, because Australia is friggin' a really difficult place to live. But it's topical at the moment. You can watch it on the SBS online kind of thing whenever you want to do it. So please go and check that out if you can. And maybe other people might also develop a different kind of appreciation for Indigenous people, kind of like what I've been able to do. Anyway, I had a question up here just at the start, and I don't want to make today's session about me at all. So like I said, I'm very happy for people to engage. Oh, thank you for that, Amber. To engage with me and using some of the software and the approaches that I actually use when it comes to our online engagement with students themselves. So one of the software packages that I use a lot is this thing called Mentimeter. And I can share that link into the thing over here. So this is just one of those general type of survey software. So if you've ever seen something like Kahoot, there's a UQ, I don't know if they still use this, but Peter might be able to tell me, UQ poll. It's just basically ways that we can do these online type of engagement type of things. And for Mentimeter, for myself, this is something I've been using in class for nearly 10 years now. So I'd always use it in the physical classroom. So I'd ask students questions about, how do you feel about this? And we can do this kind of survey or have this kind of activity. And I always found it really, really kind of engaging. And so this is something that being online was just so easy to adapt and bring into the Zoom classroom as well, or the online classroom itself. So I'm just going to flick across over to the Mentimeter, and I don't know if people have put anything in at the moment. Amber, could I get you to maybe just type something in, or let me know if you haven't typed anything in at the moment? Okay, so it is working. So this is one of those wonderful kind of technology things where I don't always know if it's going to work. So I'm glad that it is working. So whoever wrote that in, so thank you very much. Want to see things that others doing different on novel or individual as well. I want to see that too as well, because I don't have all the solutions. I don't have all the answers for this sort of stuff. And I'd love to see what other people are doing as well in terms of your own teaching. If you have strategies that are different to mine or better than mine, or you found a different way of engaging, I'd love to talk about that a little bit later. Learn more about how to be engaging on Zoom. I think the first thing to do is just talk to people like they're sitting in the room in front of you. So one of the things I found with people on Zoom is that it's always kind of alienating to some degree. Move to another. Oh, well, that's not always true. We don't always have to move to another app. You can just use it in the web browser, or your online thing. The thing I do like about Mentimeter though is that it's free for people to use, and you don't get bombarded with subscription things. You don't have to pay anything. If you guys want to pay me and send me your credit card details in an email, that's fine. But you don't need to sign up or anything like that. So different models of participation. Want to learn some awesome skills in online teaching? Yep. Somebody's trying to take control of my camera for some reason, so I'm going to decline you. New ideas for seeing familiar ideas delivered, polished delivery, session class presentations. To motivate students and interact. Yeah, I'll come up with some things there that I think might be really quite cool for you. Yeah, Luke's mentioned this thing here, like Mentimeter is free, but you're limited if you don't want to pay. But, you know, I used to use it for free for several years until Mentimeter started to get really good and really diversified some of the interactive elements to it. And I thought, oh, just it's worthwhile paying for it. So there is an educational license. And I think I'm not a spokesperson for Mentimeter here. I don't get any money for this, but it's around about $11.99 a month. And I think it's just such incredibly good value. And I use things like Mentimeter, like literally sometimes twice in a single 1 hour lecture. And I'll show you how I use that sort of stuff later. So create safe, risk-free space. I think that is something that's so important there. Well, Echo Poll, Amber's just mentioned as well. So there was a really, I didn't see it, but a really interesting seminar or workshop earlier in the week about the Echo Poll. Echo Poll, yeah, cool. All right, that's really cool. So hopefully I can touch on some of these things later. But in the meantime, like if you have anything that you do want to share specifically that you do in the classroom, please feel free to do that. The Zoom poll features could get us something similar. Oh yeah, Zoom. So Zoom does have a polling feature and it's okay, but it's nowhere near as good as something like Mentimeter itself. Mentimeter allows you to also, if you're interested, look at some of the metrics, and you can download answers and things like that at the end in terms of an Excel spreadsheet, so you can get a lot more insight in the class itself. Yeah, Menti has a QR code as well, which I didn't bother to use because I'm a bit lazy. Anyway, so when I first came across Zoom, it just felt like it was something like a Skype program to me. And in a way, it really is kind of like that these days. But I often equate it to something like the Land Cruiser from the 1980s. So if you're an Aussie that has grown up, or if you have an opportunity to go camping and have fun and stuff like that, like a 1980s Land Cruiser is for getting around. It's not fancy. It doesn't look good, but it'll always get you from A to B. And I always felt like Zoom was that for what happened to COVID at the time. Like it allowed people to be able to still maintain contact or having a presence with the classroom or their students, sorry, at least in a live state. And it got us through the pandemic, basically. I think it's such an important bit of software like that. Now, the thing about Zoom is that you don't have to use it like you're driving around that 1980s Land Cruiser. These things don't have air conditioning. Zoom doesn't really have air conditioning, but you can do stuff to pimp it out a little bit better and make it a much smoother ride that's a lot more comfortable for you and for everybody else itself. So what I'm going to do today is borrow a phrase from a wonderful movie. I think it's from about 1983 or 1984, because this is Spinal Tap. And that was a stupid mockumentary about this mythical kind of rock band. Has anyone here seen Spinal Tap? There's a great line in that where they talk about really cranking it. Luke's loving it. Where they really cranked their amps up to 11. And the reporter at the time is talking to the band, asked them, well, why don't you just make the loudest volume 10? And the musicians turned around and said, but this goes to 11. And so that's how I feel about Zoom right here. You can really push it really hard. Yeah, Stonehenge. Oh God, I love that movie. I'm gonna have to go and watch it again. Anyway, so, we can crank Zoom really, really well here. So we can, if I can put a PowerPoint slide as my background, you can literally put anything. And I will show you an example of that a little bit later. We've already had a quick look at something like Mentimeter. Mentimeter is not the only solution. I'll show you some other examples of that if we have a little bit of time later. For that person who was asking a question about motivating students and interacting on Zoom, one thing that I've started to do in the last few years is use breakout rooms. And I used to hate breakout rooms, but there are ways to make breakout rooms a lot more effective and a lot more engagement. And I'll show this example just using a whiteboard. I'll show you how to turn your mobile phone into a document camera as well, so you can have 2 webcam feeds. So these are really cool. If you do use a document camera in a classroom, you can do that in your office as well if you want. It's dead easy to do, and it's free. As long as you've got the mobile phone itself that has a camera on it, you can do any of these kind of things. I'll talk about some other little things, and thinking as well about the opportunity to be able to access the content in terms of accessibility, ideas of how we can better communicate. And one of the things I'm doing a lot at the moment is I'm trying to make sure I'm focusing on you. I'm always looking towards my webcam. And when it comes to things like communication, like there was a wonderful book. I'll go through these, Luke, very briefly. There's a wonderful book by a bloke, his name I can't remember, but he wrote about it in the 1970s. And he basically said, when we talk about communication isn't just speaking. It isn't just what you hear, but it's about what you see at the same time as well. And I want everyone to have a think about, maybe even in this very instance here, like, what are you doing at the moment? Like, maybe you're checking emails or something, but if you're paying attention to the Zoom, you're going to be looking at me, and you're going to be looking at me in the eyes right here. You might not be reading the text on the side. You might not be looking at the pictures or anything like that, but engaging. So things like communication is 50% is what you see. It's how you communicate. It's me waving my hands around, trying to look at the camera. Yeah, it's hard to do, Luke, but there's strategies on how to maintain that eye contact itself right there. So in terms of the approaches that I use, I don't go on about this for a long time, but you can see the way that students have reacted when it comes to CCATs to this online approach itself. So, looking directly at the students through the webcam, talking about the engagement, all that kind of stuff. It's really nice to see CCATs, and I hate CCATs, and I hate the way that CCATs are used, and I rarely actually do look at CCATs, but when I do look at them, it's usually the week before my teaching starts, and I'm really pleased to see this sort of stuff. Now, in my second year class, which is starting in about a week or so from now, about 6 months ago, I decided that we're not going to use Zoom on it anymore. I'm just going to take it back to the physical classroom. But then I read the bloody CCATs, and the students from last year, so the semester 2 and 22, were all raving about this hybrid approach that we've been using. So we do things like our theory, mostly online. We do some of our practical stuff online. I can show you how you can take physical teaching into a digital classroom. And then we had a physical session as well. We would all meet and have a look at the materials that were digitized. So the digital material and the real thing next to it. And so the students still wanted to have this hybrid approach. So that's what I'm going to do again in the next, the upcoming semester itself. And I don't know what the future will be. So Peter, again, you might be able to comment on this at some point, but what does the university want in the future? Are they happy to have these hybrid type of approaches, teaching on Zoom? Do they want to go back to the classroom? I just don't know. But I was talking to one of the ADAs or DVAs or one of the deans or something like that in our faculty last year, and they were talking about that kind of a hybrid approach where they like the idea of at least things like theory being taught in a Zoom type of environment, and maybe having the practical stuff taught in the classroom. I don't know, but I do know that I really like this approach, and the students, if you can do it right, they really take a lot of value out of this kind of thing.
Gilbert, I think it's important here to you're really highlighting that some of those myths around what students say. Students say they don't want to be online, they want to be back on campus, or they want recordings, but it's sometimes more about how you do it.
Yeah.
So it's the quality of your Zoom sessions. Actually, what they want is engaging experiences.
Yeah,
necessarily
absolutely.
about mode or location, and more about having meaningful experiences regardless of those formats, I think. It's probably what you're highlighting.
I definitely 100% agree with you there, Amber. It's one of those things too, like students want to talk. And one of the things I was really blown away with was the transition going from physical classroom, where I'd be in a class and I'd be asking, there's a class of 100. I say, what do you guys think about this? If you have any questions, put your hand up. And I might get 4 or 5 people to put their hand up during the course of like an hour lecture. And then when I switched to the online, because we're forced to, I could have 200 or 250 comments from a single class in a course of an hour. And a lot of the times it might just be me saying, how's everyone going today? And they're like, hello, we're doing this or that kind of thing. But, you're not going to get 100 people or 200 people, saying stuff to you in the physical classroom. So this sort of approach also gives people a voice, that engagement. That's really important. Anyway, one thing that I always looked at, and I'm not a gamer myself, but I used to see these people on YouTube, and I don't know why people watch these videos, but they play computer games and they talk and they carry on and stuff like that. And this is just a screenshot that I took from this particular bloke last night playing a computer game. So you can see he's got a game in the background and him on the screen. And it always perplexed me about how he can do this, because he's doing this live. He's playing a computer and he's recording himself at the same time in the same frame. So how do you do that on a camera? I know how you could do a screen capture. I know how you could just record yourself and then maybe later edit it and sort of embed everything on top of each other. But how do you do that? And so this is one of the big questions I had when we had to start shifting towards Zoom. As Luke's loving, it's like sitting on a couch with a friend. I don't have any friends, and I don't have any gaming machines either. So I'm in a bad position there. But I figured out how to do it, and I figured out their secret. And they have this software that's called OBS. So OBS stands for Open Broadcast Software. It costs approximately $0, so it's free and it's an open source thing. And I massively recommend it to people to do this kind of stuff. It's so simple to use. And when if you do download it and you first have a look at it, you might think, okay, this is pretty hard going. It's a little bit too technical for me, but it's like any piece of software. Like, you know, the first time you ever saw PowerPoint probably, or Microsoft Word, it looks very confusing, but it's not that difficult. And the more time you spend with it, the easier it becomes. So OBS is what people use typically, especially if they're on a PC. And this is an example of what the interface looks like. And this is just a random picture I took from a guide demonstrating how OBS works. And what he's got here, it's almost as simple as using just PowerPoint. So if you can put, for example, a shape onto your PowerPoint slide, like a square, then you wanted to have a circle overlapping that, you know how to do that. You just add these different elements and then you send one to the top. That's exactly what this guy is doing here. But instead of having an image like a shape, he's just having video feeds. So in the background here, if you want to think about this sort of big rectangular shaped background as being a slide, what he's done here is have his stream or his video of his game right here, and he's overlaying his web camera over here right there. Now, what he could do here is just completely jazz it up. He could move his little avatar, his webcam over to this side. He could make it bigger. He could make it smaller. He could cut the background out like what I've done at the moment. That's why I look like I'm sort of sitting in front of the thing itself. The whole thing here is called the scene, and this is where he names the scenes over here, and then he has those two elements, so the computer screen where he's playing the game and his webcam, which is over here, and he just orders them in a particular direction to see which one is up. And what this does then is just creates a feed, like a brand new camera, and that camera you can just send that directly into Zoom itself. So when you go into Zoom, you can change your camera, you can take it from your webcam to your OBS camera, and you can broadcast anything that you're mixing separately into Zoom, exactly like what I'm doing here at the moment. So when you see me flick around from this particular scene here to this scene here, that's two different scenes. So this is a scene with just me in my office. This is a scene here, exactly what this bloke here is doing, where I'm overlaid in a little rectangular box. It doesn't look like a rectangle, but I'm overlaid onto my PowerPoint slides at the moment. And that's just an image like that. So it's dead simple to actually do stuff like that. So if you can do your PowerPoints like what I'm doing, you can do bloody anything, right? So you could have a Word document just as an example. So if you were working through class and you had things that you wanted to work on, you can just type away. You could have an Excel spreadsheet, you can make graphs, all sorts of things. Anything that you want, anything that you can, a PDF file, anything that you can put on your computer screen can be your Zoom background itself. And it's really that simple on how to do it, okay? Now, going back to Mentimeter itself, again, there's lots of different things that you can try. I'll show you some examples of these kind of things here. And these are things I really love. And I often do things like multiple choice questions. It looks as one of the scenes now on the monitor. The screen is that more specific. What I'm actually showing you here is my PowerPoints again. So there's nothing fancy about this. This is literally one PowerPoint slide in the background and me. So it's exactly what that dude a second ago was doing. So there's no difference to that. So one thing I really love is doing things like multiple choice questions. And I do this occasionally at the very start of a lecture. So even if we haven't learned about a particular topic, we'll do this multiple choice question, and it gives the students an opportunity to first engage and tell me what they know or what they think they know. And then we can use that as a springboard to go and develop the rest of the lesson around it. So I'll just show you an example. If you just flip back over here to Mentimeter. So if you're still on Mentimeter itself, great. And I'll ask people to just stay on Mentimeter if you can. So if you haven't, if you've closed down the window or whatever, the link up is somewhere in the chat at the moment. So Amber might be able to post that, or you can just go to that menti.com again and just chuck that code into the thing there. So 55690696. So when I start to progress here, thanks for doing that, Chris. You can see just a really quick example of a type of question that I might ask my students at the moment itself. So which of those organisms that you see there, those dinosaurs is represented by fossils in Australia itself? So this is a question that's kind of near and dear to my heart, but you can see people answering bin chickens at the moment. So bin chickens, ibis, I guess. Triceratops, Stegosaur, T-Rex, and Velociraptor. So anyone can engage with this, whether it's on the computer, if it's on a mobile phone, anything like that. So it's really quite simple to use and interactive in that particular way. And this is not an exact question that I use in class, but it's something that we can use to springboard and sort of develop a class lesson around this. So I do, in one of my classes, have 1 hour where we dedicate it to things like dinosaur evolution. And one of the things that people don't realize is that birds are actually dinosaurs themselves. So birds are part of the broad clade that includes 2 of these things here. So T-Rex and Velociraptors. So the big carnivorous types of dinosaurs. It also has birds in it, believe it or not. Now, all of these things here, to my discussed as some of the most famous dinosaurs that ever existed, and none of them are Australian. They're all North American. So the only thing that we're really talking about here is the bin chicken itself. Yeah, this is why they should terrify us. If you've ever had opportunity to have lunch on campus here and you've had an ibis coming up over your shoulder to try to eat your food, that's another terrifying kind of thing right there. But that's just an example right there. So a really nice question. Another thing that's really cool that I do like about Mentimeter a lot are these different games you can have as well. And so if you guys have ever seen that TV show with Eddie, what's his name? Eddie, Eddie Dickhead from Channel 9. What's his name? I shouldn't call him a dickhead, but he's a bit of a dick. Eddie
Maguire.
Eddie Maguire. Sorry about that.
That's okay. I will now forever remember him as your endearment has.
Yeah. I hope this isn't being recorded either or broadcast to Channel 9. Anyway, so
we can edit that bit out.
Yeah. At the start of the show, there's a little part where the contestants, they sort of sit around, and we'll try it over here itself. And they sit around and to decide who goes first, they have a little multiple choice question activity where they'll have a choice of 4 things where they might say, what is blah, blah, blah. And the faster you answer it, you get more. Have I done this wrong? Oh, no, I've done something wrong here. The faster you answer, the more points that you get. So you have to get the answer right when you see this multiple choice thing. So if you get it right, you get a certain number of points. But if you get the answer within a second or something like that, you'll get more points than the person who takes 5 seconds to answer it itself. So I just show you really, really quick example of how this kind of works. So what I'll get the students to do is log in. We might do this a couple of times throughout the semester. It's like, it is like Kahoot. This is just a solution that Mentimeter have, and I just stick with Mentimeter because I know it. I do this, not in every single class, but we might do it like leading into a mid-semester exam, or make this one of the really big highlights of things like our final lectures before you break away and go into the final exams itself. So the students are all pitted up against each other. So I'm going to show you an example of a question in a second. I want you to try to answer it on your device, whatever you're using. Make sure you get it right, but answer it as fast as you can. So there's a little bit of a countdown, and it's timed as well. So you can set the different time that you want. You can do anything that you want like that. So what color is the sky on Mars? And I think Luke Nofdurft is online at the moment. So hopefully Luke has an answer to this as well. Oh, I saw him anyway. I think it was Luke. So you've got a few seconds to answer it. Yuki spotted hate 5P the chase. I don't know that. Okay, so in this particular case, it's all of these different things. So this is, again, could be another one of those cool things where you could take this information and start to teach about physics, or you could talk about atmospheric, science. You can talk about geology, any of those kind of things itself. So Mars itself actually changes color as it goes out through the day. So in the dawn and the dusk, it starts off blue, and then it goes through reds and butterscotch colors and things like that. So you've only got one person who's got that right. And so what Mentimeter will do is then throw up, oh, Luke, you're going to be banished from the Zoom class in a second. Anyway, so it will throw up this kind of leaderboard. So you can see that whoever Santa is, has answered that the fastest, and they were the only person. If there was other people, like Tom, for example, had answered it, but took 5 or 10 seconds to answer, Tom would also get points, but he might only have, 500 points or something like that. So it's a really cool kind of gamification type of way that we can use it to really interact with the students. I want to share this final question as well. I only put 2 questions in for today. But here's our second question. I just want to show you very quickly. So who was the first female professor promoted to professor at UG? So you can see the options at the bottom: Debbie Terry, Dorothy Hill, Freda Beige, and Real Hinwood. So what do you think? Luke definitely has to get this one right. Yeah, okay, very good. Okay, so Dorothy there, obviously it can't be Deborah because she's been here only fairly recently. Dorothy Hill was actually my supervisor's supervisor, and same with Luke as well, who's just joined us. So she's kind of like our academic great-grandma, which is really nice. So she got promoted, I can't remember when it was, maybe in the 1950s, something like that, or 1940s. And when Dorothy got promoted, she was the first female professor, not only at UQ, but the first female professor at any Australian university, which is something really special. And it's no wonder then that she's got things like libraries named after her. And she's also the one of only two, or is it one or two female scientists who are depicted by those beautiful carvings in the Great Court itself. So if you want to go and see Dorothy and you're on campus today, go and check out the area near the Richards building and you'll be able to see that beautiful carving there. Okay, so Wombat 1 in that particular case, so that's pretty cool. So on Wombat's device at the moment, you might be seeing like some sort of celebration, some kind of celebration saying that you won. So it's just a way that we can interact. I really do like this sort of stuff. The other thing I was going to show, I won't worry about it at the moment, but this is something that I kind of adapted after my experiences in the physical classroom as well. So always at the end of a lecture, especially in first year, you might have 100 or 200 students sitting in front of you. Most of them are too terrified to say anything to you at all. But some of the students will come down to you at the bottom of the podium, and as you're packing your laptop up or whatever, they'll come and ask you a question. And the question might be something about when something is due, or they can't come to class because of this reason, that reason, or whatever. Mentimeter also will allow the students to ask questions anonymously as well. So this is another one of those things that makes it a safe space for students who are too fearful of sharing their name, or they're turning the camera on or something like that. They don't have to use the chat to get information that they might want to ask. It's just a really nice way of, again, kind of breaking down those, it's really diverse, as the other Luke is saying as well. It's just another way we can really engage with not just the students who are really comfortable and happy to put their hands up in class, but every student, regardless of what the background is or how they actually feel it. So that's something I think is super, super important. Now, going to an interactive whiteboard, the other Luke, there's two Lukes. The other Luke, actually, Luke Zafir, I hope I'm pronouncing that, is actually my academic brother as well. So we're both PhD students of the same bloke at the same time. So we've got the same supervisor. So this interactive whiteboard is something I really, really love here. And I'll show you how this works. And what I'll do is not ask everybody to type that in, but I will post the link to this particular whiteboard here. Hopefully that works. This is a thing called WBO, and it's a free, again, open source whiteboard that you can generate specifically for you. You can customize the URL here. I just haven't done that at the moment itself. So instead of having that hideous name right there, you could change it to blah, 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 board/Zoom or board/ whatever your actual class is called. What do you think about the Zoom whiteboard? I don't like it, the other Luke. The original Luke, I should call you probably, because you were here before the other Luke. So original Luke, I don't really like the whiteboard itself. I think there's a much greater benefits of using this particular whiteboard itself, in that it can be like truly collaborative. So think about it as being like a butcher's paper, for example, that anyone in the class can access if they have the link to it itself. So you can see people using it at the moment, typing, drawing 1980s Land Cruisers, which is a fun, fantastic car. One way that I actually use this is in one of the classes that I have, I go into the whiteboard beforehand, and I might set up lots of different rooms. So this is me typing at the top here at the moment. So I might type in breakout room 1, we'll have breakout room 2 over here, blah, blah, blah. And then I'll set up a bunch of kind of like, tables like that, where we might have a session where we might split the class into however many breakout rooms I want. And then each of those breakout rooms will be dedicated a particular space on the interactive whiteboard or butcher's paper, however you want to think about it. And we talk about stuff. And so like one example we had, one of the areas that I work in is this question about what happened to the giant kangaroos and the giant wombats that used to roam across Australia. So we used to have, I have used Miro a little bit, but I like this solution here because it's free, it's really accessible, and it's the first thing that I really, really liked. Miro might be better than this, I don't know these days, but this is something I really love. Anyway, so we break out into these different rooms. I get the tutors to go into the rooms themselves. For me personally, I'm able to float around the different rooms and seeing what people are talking about. And we just discuss ideas about like what happened to all these extinct animals in Australia? Why did they go extinct? And we come up with some solutions and ideas. But the beautiful thing is that the whiteboard evolves itself to kind of evolve in front of everybody's eyes You know, you're unrestricted about what you want to do right there. You can draw images, you can annotate things itself, you can draw figures in there, graphs or anything like that. Just write down ideas, all that sort of good stuff itself. The beauty of having something like this particular whiteboard as well is that you don't need to be logged into Zoom to be able to see it, and it will be there permanently. Now, if I share this link later on with students in a Blackboard announcement or something like that, everybody can go and access this as a particular resource. So it's something that's really easy to use, and I rave about this too much probably, but I really love this, and this is an excellent way to again develop and break down the weirdness of what Zoom can be to a class and get people to really start to talk together as a community itself. And that was some of the other feedback I had too. Like, you know, the students have always said to me that the way that the Zoom is kind of working to be an interactive type of thing like this, it does help develop a sense of community. It might not be as good as students sitting around a desk and talking, you know, face to face or something like that, but it's still a really wonderful way to bring people together from different parts of the world, different parts of Australia, or different scenarios or situations that they all have. I don't know who's playing there, but somebody is about to lose or win, but we'll lose, or maybe we'll have a dud result right there. Anyway, so that's something that's really cool. I'm going to break away back over to here. I'm going to break away back over here. So that's just an example. You know, I think it's such a good thing to do. Really easy to set up as well. And like I was saying, it's free. And it's so easy to share around. Now, this is the other thing too. I always looked at things like these document cameras. Like I use these quite a lot. Upload images to WBO, fans asking. I don't think you can, but I'm not sure. You might have to have a look into that. Anyway, document cameras, I teach in a physical space. A lot of you guys might not have physical objects to teach with, but you might have things like worksheets that you want to work through in a particular class itself. And you can simulate a document camera like this that we have in almost every single lecture room super easily and super for free as well, because that's the thing I do. Like everything I'm showing you at the moment just about is free, or at least to get started anyway. So one thing that you can do is take an app like this, and this is for an Android. I don't know if it's for Apple anymore. I can't remember, but it's a thing called DroidCam. And all it is an app that you put onto your phone and you install the software client onto your desktop itself, turn it on, make sure you're on the correct Wi-Fi network. And what your phone will do is basically engage as a separate web camera itself and you can feed that into Zoom itself. You could feed that into OBS, like what I'm about to do right now. You can do anything that you want, okay? So in this particular case, you can see that up here, which you can't quite see, that's where my mobile phone is at the moment. I can show you that a little bit later if you want to see it. This is just a piece of paper. You can do, you know, any kind of drawing activities that you want to do. You can fill in worksheets, super easy to do. Anything that you can think about itself. Have you got it suspended from something? Yeah, I can show you that too, original Luke, if you want a little bit later. There's a really cool thing I didn't realize, but if you've got like a teenage kid at home, they probably know all about ring cameras and ring lights and all that kind of stuff. And I didn't know about that until one day I accidentally found myself in Kmart. And Kmart have an entire section of electrical goodies where they got all these ring things. They got cables for USBs. They got all sorts of different things like that. And I bought a really cheap, it's like $9 or $10 little arm thing. And so it's clipped onto my bench at the moment. There's a light on it. Yeah, super cheap. And it just is a holder for my mobile phone. I'll show you that very soon. Anyway, so think about anything that you can draw. You can have it as like a document filling in thing, worksheet, whatever you want to do. Use it as the bloody, if you're teaching with physical things, that's just a little ornament of a type of a mineral called malachite there that has been carved into to look like a little rhino. Anything like that, physical objects like that. The other thing I do as well is take the camera itself and take it off the clip. I can take it and move it around the classroom itself. So a lot of times when we have been Zooming from a physical classroom. I can go around and talk to students and say, okay, this is a specimen of blah, blah, blah. And you can see that in section 2.7 of the notes. And these are the questions that we're going to be asking about it. And you can use it as a roving microphone as well. So I'm not attached to the physical computer all the time. I can go anywhere in the classroom, talk to students and sort of have a good time like that. Now, there are other apps out there. I just happen to have found the Droid Cam as one of the first things I came across, and I use it, and it's free. There is a paid version for it, and I did buy the paid version, but I actually found the unpaid cheap version a little bit better. It's not as choppy. Got students use Droid for sharing something in class. No, students haven't done that, but they will share. And because students want to talk about stuff, and especially in my second year class, it's all about fossils. And so many students that come into the class have a fossil collection. So a lot of times we'll find them just like holding it up to their own web camera, talking about things. But I'd be certainly happy for people to use something like a Droid Cam. That would be totally cool. Now, if any of this stuff scares you and you want an even easier solution in some ways to put a webcam onto your PowerPoint slides, there is a plugin that is available for Microsoft 365. So if you're on PC or if you're on Apple, you can do this if you've got the desktop client. All you have to do, and this is just a screenshot of something I was mucking around with the other day. Whoops, get away. And I was just kind of playing around with it. And what I've got here is just my regular type of slide in PowerPoint itself. If you want to have your own webcam being fed into that, all you have to do is go up here to insert. Across the tabs over here, there's a thing called Cameo. So click on Cameo and it'll put in a default, maybe it's a circle, maybe it's a square, and you can, it will be off originally. You just click the little camera icon right there and it'll turn your web camera on itself. So if you do find yourself doing things like pre-records in something like a PowerPoint itself, really easy way to have a visual of you, again, connecting and communicating. So making sure that we're ticking that 50% box of communication being what you see itself. So that's a really easy thing to do there. Now you can also feed this into things like Teams and Zoom itself. Zoom's a little bit tricky, but Teams is super easy. There's a Cameo thing that appears in a Cameo mode that appears in Zoom where, being Microsoft products, they can sort of interact quite well. There is a little bit of a chat harder thing to do with Zoom. If you've got a PowerPoint slide with your web camera already on, and then you go to Zoom to start that up and try to get your web camera to be used there, the Zoom will not like the fact that the web camera is already being used by a different program, so it won't display, okay? But what you can do is set it up in a way. So here I've got, this is just the Zoom window, and the Zoom window's got my webcam on my laptop. And this is a slide that I set up earlier. And this is just using that Droid Cam again. So using it as kind of like that document camera itself. So I've just set it up. We've got two different feeds. There's no conflict at all in this particular case. Students can still see me banging away, talking about things, getting at 50% of the communication. And they can see me using the Droid Cam as a document camera for the specimens or worksheets or whatever. So there are ways to get around all of these different things as well. I was just going to mention some other ways to boost engagement. And, we're massive on things like 3D models in our work here. So not everyone here will be teaching in a physical type of space, but I just wanted to share, just if you are teaching things about, maybe geography, maybe geology, biology, anything that has a physical aspect, there are really good resources. And this is an example of a resource that has 3D models called Sketchfab. No worries, and I'll finish up soon. Sketchfab is really cool. Has anyone ever been to a place called Fingal Heads in northern New South Wales? This is Fingal Heads right here. So this is one of our places that we take students, and we also turned it into basically a virtual field trip. So you can see some of the headlands that we have over there. These are some of the rocks that students get to look at. But Sketchfab is a really wonderful resource for bringing this stuff into the classroom. If you wanted to dabble around with things like Google Earth as well. So Google Earth, again, anything that you have as a background can be your Zoom. You can put into your Zoom background, sorry. Anything that you can put onto your screen can be your background. So again, if you're talking about geography, if you're talking about a city in Poland that you want students to know about, it doesn't matter what you're doing. It all interacts, and it all is another way that you can add to that whole boost of engagement itself. What was I going to say here? Yeah, we sort of mentioned this already. I think one of the benefits of having things like Zoom as well, when it comes to things like recordings, like if you're recording in a practical physical room itself, you're not capturing the person delivering the message itself. The recording qualities are much greater, much better if you're doing it through Zoom or doing it through Teams or whatever. You're getting a good crisp recording. You're getting exactly what you see on the screen right now. So it makes it really accessible. So for students who can't, that might have a hearing disability, you know, you can integrate this stuff with captions as well. You can just see an animated GIF there with some captions going live onto the screen. But Echo 360, I think it is, can do all that sort of stuff later on anyway through post-processing. For students whose language is not, first language is not English, again, seeing the way that people are speaking can really open up a world of accessibility right there. Thinking about communication too, always looking at the screen as best you can. You might see me looking to the side as well. When I'm looking to the side itself, I'm looking at my second monitor over here. But it's still, the way I've got it set up, it still makes it look like I'm looking at the text that you see over here. It's not like I'm looking over here, not engaging with the audience or anything like that. So if you set up in the right kind of way, it's easy. A 1%er, as they say in AFL football, is to just do tiny little things that makes a great benefit to the rest of the team. And I think just looking at a webcam is that great benefit. Now, I've put together some resources. So because I'm an idiot and I have too much time on my hands, I started my own website about all this online teaching stuff. So it's called pandemicteaching.com. And it's just ideas and how-tos and perspectives. And I'll put together a little package for everyone here at the moment. So if you want to click on, go to that link or scan the QR code, or just do what Amber did and just copy that thing there. So this is what it looks like over here. So everything that I've been talking about today, absolutely happy to share. So there's instructions on how to do things like using OBS, using things like Mentimeter, links to the whiteboard. Have a go into that, have a play with it for yourself, using things like a Joy-Cam and so forth. So I'm very happy for people to take as much out of this as possible. And if anyone does want to try to adopt this into your own teaching and you find that you might be struggling with some of it, just, I'm open to helping people as well. So feel free to just reach out. Anyway, that's all I have to say at the moment, because if I talk too long, Amber will go mad at me. So I'm going to stop and say thank you to
special
everyone.
Job.
Yeah, hit me with a big stick or something.
So we're due to finish at 10:02, but there's a couple of minutes for questions, and depending on where other people want to be, they might want to hang around for a few more questions, as long as you're comfortable to do so, Gilbert. Yeah, no, that's okay. I'm really happy to answer any questions from anyone, and I'd also love to hear how other people do stuff as well. So if you've got anything that you've done in your own teaching, particularly online or even in a classroom that you find really effective, I'd love to hear about that. Like I said, I don't have all the answers, but I think some of the things I've been able to come up with. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with. I think that they can be translated and used across a whole wide range of disciplines. It doesn't matter if you're teaching paleontology or whatever. Sorry, Chris, you can ask a question if you want.
It's not so much a question. I just wanted to share a little bit of magic from a colleague who, sadly, she's leaving the university, but she had this amazing idea of, you had the whiteboards and the annotation sort of stuff. And what she would do, she would intentionally draw on the wrong response because it was anonymous, and the anonymity meant that she could like break that ice of someone's done it first, and then she could do the wrong response and then say, oh, I see someone's done such and such, that's not quite the right answer, and then sort of create a safe space in that way, which I thought was a cool tip.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. Anything like that to get people to engage, and a lot of times people want to point out when other people are wrong or whatever, and that can lead to a whole level of different engagement itself. And I know that's a strategy that some people do use on social medias and stuff like that. But yeah, that's a really great tip. Did you want me to stop the recording, Amber, at the moment?
Yeah, unless we want to keep some of these questions on the recording. Maybe that was quite a good one, Chris. So up to you, Gil. It sounds like we've got some great questions.
Yeah, I'll have to leave it on a little bit longer.
Yeah, no worries.
Anyone else have anything you want to share or talk about?
I have a question about specs, and this is because it's something I've come across, is when I first started really kind of using multiple tools as well as Zoom, I hit a wall because my computer just wasn't up to the task, and it was actually, I'm not a computer person, so I had to go on a bit of a journey. But do you have any tips there? For example, I kept thinking it was my internet speed that was a problem because it would all slow down, but actually it was the graphics card, which I had to learn about.
I'm not a computer person either. I'm certainly not a hardware person. I'll tell you about the computer I've got at the moment. It's around about a 2017 model that the university supplies. So it's a Dell Latitude something or other. There's nothing fancy about it in any kind of way. So it's a pretty old computer these days by UK standards. When I first started doing this, though, I was using a Surface Pro tablet. So I had a Surface Pro 3 or 4, I think it was. And that was really good. The only problem was the screen was a little bit small, so I don't use it anymore, but I do use a second monitor, and that really makes things a lot easier. Super briefly, I'll show you what my setup looks like at the moment. Now, it might look like I'm sitting in my room, but this is actually I've got a green screen behind me, and what a green screen is just a green bit of fabric, like literally. There's nothing technical or fancy about it at all. So just back onto the old Zoom here, so you can see. Just ignore my messy office, and don't look at my coffee mug there. It's a little bit dirty, so I might even move that to the side. But this is exactly what I'm doing. Like I'm nothing fancy. I've got books down the bottom that I'm propping my computer up to make it sort of my eye line where the web camera is itself. I've got my computer going on. The two things that you see on the screen at the moment is the Zoom window itself. So I've got the Zoom window only in a very small kind of space down through here. And then I've got the OBS view down here itself. So all those different scenes I was talking about, so you might even be able to read it, I'm not sure, but that's my document camera, my PowerPoint, my front camera, and these are the various things that I'm showing at the time. So that's where I'm doing the looking. Over here is my second monitor, where you can just see all the different things I've got. So I've got my PowerPoint on this corner of the screen. That's just my Firefox itself. That's down a Word document, and that's just Google Earth over there. So that's literally how fancy it is. And this is what I look like on the side. Very messy. And this is literally the green screen that I have behind me itself. So the green screen is just a color. It's nothing. You don't plug it in. This is a $5 or $10 bed sheet I think I bought that I hung up on a bloody stand there. All I do here is just put a little filter onto it once I've got it loaded into OBS, and it just takes everything else away. You don't have to do that. You don't have to do any of these things I was talking about, but to me, it just adds a little bit more of a kind of interactive visual type element anyway.
Gilbert, I'll let people go if they need to,
yes.
But I can see Francisco's got a question there.
Yes.
So
yeah, no worries. Yeah, feel free to drop off, do anything that you want. Sorry, Francisco.
No, that's all right. Last summer, I was using polls from Zoom to make sure students were interacting through the tutorials. But of course, they need some motivation to answer to the poll too. So you start asking them and letting them know how many answers we had and everything, kind of creating this a little bit uncomfort moment, like for waiting for them. But do you have some advice and to motivate them to answer polls, for example?
Usually, a lot of times it's good to have students who are a little bit more confident in class, who are willing to get amongst it first. And a lot of times you find a student who can kind of bring other students along with it. Now, it's very funny that you mentioned that, because Amber and I had a really super quick Zoom meeting about half an hour before we started today. And I asked Amber if, because I knew that this particular session was really small, I asked Amber if she would be able to use things like the Mentimeter. Maybe if nobody else is using it, but just like go in and start and be that student who's a little bit more encouraging. So it's sort of hard if you don't have a stooge to help you out with some of that stuff. But I think if you just kind of break it down as best you can, and always talk to students in a way that you just try to be encouraging to them, like, make sure it's safe, that you're not going to get in trouble if they get the wrong answer. And I love wrong answers more than anything, because we can use that to springboard and go on to something else later on. So just making people feel comfortable, I think. And I think you're probably doing the right thing. It's just I don't know, but that's sort of how I do it. Somebody asked me a question. So Chris, unless you're happy to have a square in the corner, that won't need a green screen. Yeah, so you don't need to have a green screen. So just going back to that image, sorry, Amber, I know you probably want to go soon. Just going back to this picture over here, this guy doesn't have a green screen at all. So he's, there it is. So you don't need to have a green screen if you want to adopt that same kind of setup itself. OBS has greater benefits than things like Cameo, in that it's just so easy. Like, you don't, with Cameo in PowerPoint, all you can do is show PowerPoint. Whereas with OBS, you can overlay yourself with anything on the computer itself. So I'm just going to go to my OBS right now. You can see how I can just move myself around the screen. I can reposition, the PowerPoint slides themselves, do anything that you want with it, right? It's just too easy to use, and that's how I can, integrate it with the different other things that I've been using today. So go back over here. But yeah, you don't have to have anything fancy. And don't forget, a green screen is just something that's green. It's not something that you plug into a wall or anything like that. I've literally got a sheet behind me, a bed sheet. So anyway.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Gilbert.
Yeah.
You actually had quite a lot of learning design in the room today, but I think we all picked up something. And I'll plug that there are definitely learning designers and other support around the university if you're kind of not sure where to start. Or Francisco, I think if you're looking at, what's kind of preventing your students from engaging in those questions, there's probably a learning designer who can have a look with you. Or Gilbert probably seems generous with his time. So thanks very much. We'll wrap it up there just so everyone can move on. But really appreciate your time, Gilbert. That was super awesome.
No worries. Well, thanks everyone.